The Galactic Council had made a decision that shook every corner of the known universe. Princess of the Empire would choose a mate. This was not just any decision. This was the most important marriage in the history of galactic civilization. Every advanced species in the universe wanted their best candidate to be selected. Every world hoped their representative would become the husband of the most powerful being in 3 sectors of space. The council chambers were massive. They stretched for miles underground on the planet. Thousands of beings from hundreds of different species filled the Great Hall. Some had bodies of pure energy. Some were made of crystal. Some walked on many legs. Others floated in the air without moving their limbs. All of them had come with the same purpose. All of them believed their species deserved the great honor of being joined with the royal family. The Empire sent their finest warrior. His body was covered with scales that could turn away any weapon. He could move faster than light itself. His mind was sharp and deadly. He had won 1,000 battles. He had conquered entire star systems for his people. When entered the selection hall, the other candidates moved away from him. They feared his power. They sent a genius named Vex. Vex could think faster than any computer ever built. He could solve problems that would take regular scientists 1,000 years to figure out. His brain had been enhanced so many times that he could barely remember what being normal felt like. The other candidates listened when Vex spoke. They knew his intelligence was beyond their understanding. The kingdom sent their last surviving prince. His family had ruled for 10,000 years. His body had been modified with the best technology available. His muscles were stronger than steel. His bones would not break even if a mountain fell on him. He was handsome by the standards of every species. He was tall and perfect. He represented everything that thousands of years of careful breeding could create. Many other species sent their champions too. There were warriors who could destroy planets. There were artists who could create beauty that made other beings weep. There were philosophers who had spent their entire lives studying the mysteries of the universe. There were politicians who controlled the destinies of billions of people. Each one believed they were the best. Each one was certain they deserved to marry the princess. But then something strange happened. A single human walked into the selection hall. His name was David. He was from Earth, a small planet in a forgotten corner of the galaxy. Humans had only recently left their home world. They had no advanced technology like other species. They could not manipulate energy. They could not move faster than light without machines. Their bodies were weak. They got tired. They got sick. They could only live for about 80 or 90 years. When the other candidates saw David, they laughed. They actually laughed out loud. A human. This was a joke. This was an insult. Why was a human even allowed in the selection hall? The council must have made a mistake. The security guards must have failed to do their job. A human had no business competing with the greatest beings in the galaxy. David did not react to their laughter. He stood quietly and waited for his turn to present himself to the princess. He was not afraid. He was not angry. He simply waited. His hands did not shake. His voice did not sound nervous when he finally spoke. Princess sat on her throne made of light and pure energy. She had been listening to each candidate with the same expression on her face. She showed no emotion. She did not seem impressed by the warrior. She did not seem amazed by the genius. She did not seem moved by the prince's beauty and perfection. She simply listened. The candidates had all tried to impress her with their power, had demonstrated his ability to move through solid objects and appear anywhere he wanted in the chamber. Vex had solved mathematical problems that the greatest computers of their civilization could not answer, had shown off the advanced technology in his body and explained how he could live forever. But when David walked forward, he did something completely different. He did not try to show off. He did not try to prove he was strong or smart or powerful. He simply told the princess about his home. He spoke about Earth. He told her about the oceans that covered most of the planet. He described mountains so tall they touched the clouds. He talked about forests where millions of different kinds of animals live together. He told her about deserts and rivers and storms and rain. Then David spoke about humans. He explained how humans loved each other. He told the princess about his own sister who had raised her son alone after her husband died. She worked hard every single day. She was tired all the time. She had very little money, but she always made sure her son had food to eat and a warm bed to sleep in at night. She hugged him when he was scared. She laughed with him when he was happy. David told the princess about human art. He spoke about paintings that showed how humans saw the world. He talked about music that made humans feel emotions so strong they could not control their tears. He described stories that humans created to explain the mysteries of life and death and meaning. He explained how humans helped each other. When one human was in trouble, other humans would come to help them. They did not always ask for something in return. They just helped. They worked together to build cities and grow food and create beautiful things. The princess listened carefully. Her expression did not change, but something had shifted inside her. She was hearing something from David that she had not heard from any of the other candidates. The others had talked about power and perfection and advancement. David was talking about something much simpler. He was talking about being alive. He was talking about caring for other beings. He was talking about love. When David finished speaking, he stepped back. The hall was completely quiet. All the other candidates were shocked. The human had said nothing impressive. He had shown no special powers. He had not proven his superiority in any way, yet something about his words had affected them all. Then Princess did something that no one expected. She dismissed all the other candidates. All the great warriors and geniuses and perfect princes had to leave the chamber. She told them they had not been chosen. The selection was over. The Galactic Council members were stunned. The other candidates were angry. How could she choose a human? How could she reject all the greatest beings in the galaxy? This did not make sense. This was not logical. This was not how things were supposed to work. But Princess did not explain her choice to anyone. She simply extended her hand toward David. She looked at him with eyes that showed she understood something that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten how to understand. David reached out and took her hand. In that moment, everything changed. The future of the galaxy shifted. No one knew it yet. But the choice of one alien princess to love one simple human would change the entire universe forever. The news spread quickly through all of civilization. The galaxy erupted in shock and anger and confusion. The age of understanding and change had just begun. The announcement of Princess' choice spread through the galaxy like fire. Every communication system broadcast the news. Every planet received the message. The princess had chosen a human, not a mighty warrior, not a brilliant scientist, not a perfect prince from an ancient kingdom. She had chosen someone weak, someone limited. Someone from a backward species that had barely reached the stars. The reaction was immediate and harsh. Governments declared official statements of protest. Military commanders began moving their ships. Scientists questioned whether the princess was still thinking clearly. Religious leaders said the marriage was a violation of the natural order. The Empire sent a message demanding that the selection be cancelled. They said it was impossible for a human to be worthy of such an honor. They threatened to cut off all trade with the Empire if the marriage went forward. The civilization announced they were breaking off all diplomatic relations. For 3,000 years, the Enda had worked together to maintain peace in their region of space. Now that partnership was over. They said that any civilization that would make such a foolish choice could not be trusted to handle important galactic matters. They pulled their ambassadors out of the capital. They ordered their ships to stay away from space. The kingdom declared that Earth itself was a threat to galactic stability. They said that if humans were allowed to breed with royal blood, the entire structure of civilization could collapse. They called for restrictions on human contact with other species. They suggested that maybe Earth should be isolated from the rest of the galaxy before humans could cause more damage. Smaller civilizations watched and waited. They did not know what to do. Should they join the powerful species in their protest, or should they accept what the princess had decided? The uncertainty made everyone nervous. Many planets moved their military forces to higher alert. War seemed possible. Peace seemed fragile. The Galactic Council held an emergency meeting. The Council was the body that made all important decisions for civilization. They represented the most powerful and advanced species. Their word was law across most of the galaxy. When they spoke, entire worlds listened. Now they met to discuss what to do about Princess. Herself attended the meeting. She stood in the council chamber with David beside her. She did not sit above the other council members on a special throne. She stood as an equal. David stood right next to her. He did not hide. He did not act ashamed of who he was. The council members attacked her choice immediately. They spoke with anger and disappointment. How could she reject the warrior? His strength was legendary. How could she refuse the genius? His intelligence was beyond measure. How could she turn away the prince? His family had created the greatest civilization known to history. One council member named Rector stood up and spoke with harsh words. He said that the Empire had always been the standard of perfection in the galaxy. They had the best technology. They had the best warriors. They had created beauty and art that other species could only admire from a distance. Now the princess was throwing all of that away. She was mixing blood with human blood. Humans were primitive. Humans were weak. This marriage would make her children weak too. Another council member named spoke next. She said that there were laws about what species could breed together. These laws existed to protect the purity of great civilizations. Breaking these laws would cause chaos. Other species would start mixing their bloodlines. Standards would disappear. Everything the galaxy had built would crumble. Listen to all of this without showing anger. She stood calmly and waited until all the council members had finished speaking. Then she answered them. Her voice was quiet but steady. She spoke in simple words that everyone could understand. The princess said that the Empire had been chasing perfection for 10,000 years. They had improved their bodies and their minds. They had created technology that could do anything. They had pursued every kind of advancement known to living beings. But something was being lost in this pursuit. Something important. She explained that her people were dying, not from disease, not from war, but from sterility. The genetic changes they had made to themselves over the centuries had left them unable to have children easily. They were becoming fewer and fewer with each generation. Soon, the greatest civilization in the galaxy would have no future. Everyone would be gone. But when stood near David, something strange happened. The human's presence triggered something in her body. It was not something that could be explained by logic or science. It was something deeper, something that her people had lost long ago. Being with David made her feel alive in a way that no amount of technological advancement could provide. It made her believe that the species could have a future again. She was not choosing David for political reasons. She was choosing him because he was her only hope. And she was choosing him because he made her feel like more than just the most powerful being in the galaxy. He made her feel like a person. He looked at her with eyes that saw her as, not as a title or a position of power. David spoke next. He said something simple. He asked the council why they believed that choice should be based on being the most powerful or the most perfect. Why could choice not be based on something else? Why could love not matter more than strength or intelligence or perfection? The council members did not know how to answer that question. They had never thought about it before. In their entire history, the idea of choosing based on love had seemed illogical, but now a human was asking them to consider it. The threat of war grew stronger over the next days. The Empire moved more military ships toward space. They demanded that the other species take sides. They began blockading human trade routes. Military violence seemed about to erupt. David realized that his choice to marry was going to cause death. Billions of people might die because of what they had decided together. He told that she should leave him. She should choose one of the other candidates. She should save her people from the war that was coming. But refused. She had made her choice. She would not abandon David or her love for him. She would rather face war than live without him. And then she told David something that she had kept secret from everyone. She was pregnant. David's child was growing inside her body. This should have been impossible. According to all the scientific knowledge of their civilization, a human and N could never create new life together. But it had happened. The impossible had become real. A new life was being created. A hybrid child that should not exist was coming into the universe. Said this child was hope. This child was the future that her people needed, and she would protect this child no matter what the galaxy decided to do. War could come. The council could turn against her, but she would not give up her love and she would not give up her child. David understood then what it meant to truly love another being. It meant being willing to face the entire galaxy for one person. It meant choosing love over safety. It meant choosing hope over fear. He took his hand and they stood together, ready to face whatever was coming next. The military forces of the Galactic Council moved toward space like a massive wave about to crash on the shore. Thousands of ships were coming. Millions of soldiers were preparing for war. The council had made their decision. If would not cancel the marriage, they would remove her from power. They would take control of the empire and prevent the hybrid child from being born. News of the approaching military force reached David, and while they were still on the planet, the princess's advisors came to her with urgent messages. They told her to flee. They said there was no way to win against such a large force. The council controlled the most powerful military in the galaxy. Resistance was impossible. Made a quick decision. She and David would leave. They would take a small ship and escape, but they could not take the entire population with them. They could not save everyone. Some of her people would choose to fight. Others would try to negotiate with the council. Had to accept that her choice had divided her own civilization. The ship they took was built for scientific research, not for combat or long journeys. It was small and fast, but not invisible. Other ships could track it. The supplies were limited. They could only survive for a few weeks before they needed to find a place to land and get food and water. David took control of the navigation systems. He was good at finding solutions to problems that seemed impossible. This was a human skill that the advanced species of the galaxy had forgotten about. When humans faced challenges, they did not give up immediately. They tried new things. They took risks. They refused to accept that something could not be done. He plotted a course away from the military forces, but he could not just run forever. Eventually, they would be caught. They needed a place to hide, a place where the council's ships could not find them, a place where people would be willing to give them shelter and support. David studied the maps of the galaxy. He looked for planets that were far from council space. He searched for civilizations that had been hurt by the council in the past. He found smaller species that had never agreed with the council's decisions. One by one, he marked these places on his navigation system. Meanwhile was suffering. The pregnancy was becoming harder. Her body was changing in ways that No had experienced before. The human child inside her was affecting her in ways that doctors did not understand. Sometimes she was in pain. Sometimes she felt weak. But she never complained. She never asked David to turn back or give up. They flew toward a planet called Margin 7. This was a world controlled by the species that had been ignored by the Galactic Council for centuries. They were small and quiet. They did not have great military power or advanced technology, but they were kind. They had a culture of helping those in need. When David landed on Margin 7, the leaders were surprised. They did not know who was at first. They did not understand that a princess of the empire was now in their territory. But when they learned the truth, they were moved by the story. They saw a being in danger. They saw a mother protecting her unborn child. They opened their homes. News of where was hiding spread through the galaxy. Some people heard the news and felt angry, but others heard it and felt something different. They felt hope. They felt like maybe the galaxy could change. Maybe things did not always have to follow the old rules. Maybe there was a different way to live. Slowly, others began traveling toward Margin 7. Some were scientists who wanted to study the hybrid child when she was born. Some were artists who wanted to create art about the love between David and... Some were ordinary beings who were just tired of following the Council's rules. Some were soldiers who had refused to fight in the military action against the princess. They all came because they believed in something new. David met with these arrivals. He listened to their stories. He learned what they wanted. He understood that they were all searching for something that the rigid structures of galactic civilization could not give them. They wanted freedom. They wanted to make their own choices. They wanted to be accepted for who they were, not for what they could do or what species they belonged to. Together, they began to form a new group. They called it the Free Worlds Collective. The goal was simple. They would create a new civilization. It would not follow the old rules of the Galactic Council. It would not measure worth by power or intelligence or perfection. It would value all beings equally. It would let individuals choose their own path. It would celebrate difference instead of forcing conformity. David proved to be an excellent leader. Humans had a quality that other species admired once they understood it. Humans could dream about things that seemed impossible and then actually make them happen. David could see problems and imagine solutions that no one else had considered. When the Council's forces finally located the collective, they were not prepared for what they found. There was not a small group of refugees hiding in fear. There was an entire civilization building something new. There were schools being created. There were farms being planted. There were workshops where artists were creating beauty. There were meetings where different species were learning to understand each other. The military commander of the Council's forces was ordered to attack, but when he saw what was actually happening on Margin 7, he stopped. He saw something that changed his mind. He saw give birth to a baby girl. He watched as David held his newborn daughter. He witnessed the celebration of all the different species coming together to welcome a new life. The military commander made his own choice. He refused to follow the Council's orders. He told the Council that this group was not a threat. They were not building weapons. They were not planning to attack anyone. They were simply building a new way of living together. His refusal to attack bought time for the collective. The Council was divided. Some members wanted to destroy the collective immediately, but others were beginning to question the Council's actions. Why were they attacking a group of beings who wanted peace? What made the Council right and the collective wrong? The baby girl was named Lyra. She was perfectly healthy. She had features from her mother and human features from her father. She was beautiful in a way that combined the best of both species. When people saw Lyra, they could no longer say that a hybrid child was an abomination. She was proof that connection and love could create something wonderful. She was the future that the galaxy needed to see. The image of a newborn hybrid child spread through every corner of the galaxy. Ships carried the message. Radio signals broadcast the news. Every being who had access to communication saw the pictures of little Lyra in her mother's arms. She was not a monster. She was not a disease. She was a baby. She was beautiful. She was alive. Everything changed after that moment. The Galactic Council's authority began to weaken. They had called the hybrid child an abomination. They had threatened war to prevent her birth. But now millions of beings had seen her with their own eyes. They realized that the Council had been wrong. They had let fear control their thinking. They had refused to accept something new and different. The Free Worlds Collective grew rapidly. What had started as a small group of refugees fleeing the Council's forces had become a real civilization. Thousands of ships arrived weekly. Families from hundreds of different species came to settle on Margin 7 and the other planets that joined the collective. David worked every day to build the new civilization. He did not claim to be a ruler or a king. He did not want power or authority. He simply worked alongside everyone else. He helped construct buildings. He worked in the fields that grew food. He participated in meetings where decisions were made about how the society should develop. But people listened to David when he spoke. They trusted him. They valued his opinions, not because he was the strongest but because he treated everyone with respect. He listened to ideas from all kinds of beings. He never said that one species was better than another. He never made anyone feel inferior or unwanted. Lyra grew up in this new society. She was surrounded by different kinds of beings. By the time she was old enough to talk, she had learned 10 different languages. She had friends from 50 different species. She did not grow up thinking that one way of life was better than another. She grew up believing that diversity made life richer and more interesting. As Lyra got older, she showed abilities that were unique. She could think using both human intuition and logic. She could make decisions quickly like her father and think deeply like her mother. She could understand how both humans and saw the world. She had a gift for bringing people together and helping them understand each other. Focused on teaching, she shared the knowledge of civilization with everyone who wanted to learn, but she did not just teach technical knowledge. She taught philosophy. She taught about the history of her people and why they had made the choices they had made. She explained how the pursuit of perfection had left her civilization empty and dying. She showed how meeting David and accepting difference had given her people a reason to hope again. The council tried to maintain control, but it was becoming impossible. More and more species demanded representation in the council's decisions. Species that had been ignored for centuries now demanded a voice. Young beings from advanced civilizations questioned the old rules. They asked why they had to follow systems that were created thousands of years ago. They wanted something different. Within 10 years, the structure of galactic government changed completely. The old council was dissolved. A new council of councils was created. Each planet and each species got to choose their own representatives. Decisions were made through discussion and agreement instead of through the authority of the most powerful beings. The Empire joined the new system. The civilization agreed to participate. Even the kingdom accepted the changes. Not all of them did so willingly. Some believed they were losing power. Some thought the new system was too slow and too complicated. But eventually, they all accepted that the old way was over. Lyra became a bridge between the old civilization and the new one being built. She traveled to different worlds. She talked to different species. She showed them that change did not mean destruction. She proved that accepting others did not mean giving up your own identity. She represented hope for a better future. By the time Lyra was 20 years old, hybrid relationships had become common in the galaxy. Young beings from different species were falling in love and creating new families. Research centers were being built to study the genetics of different hybrid combinations. Artists were creating beautiful works about the connection between different civilizations. Everything that the council had said was impossible was now becoming normal. David aged as humans do. His hair turned gray. His movements became slower. But his influence only grew. He had become a symbol of what was possible when beings were willing to choose love over fear, when beings were willing to accept difference instead of rejecting it. The universities that were built throughout the galaxy taught human history and human philosophy alongside advanced alien science. Young beings studied the achievements of human civilization. They learned about human art and music and literature. They learned that humans, despite being a young species, had something valuable to offer the galaxy. They had the ability to feel deeply. They had the ability to dream beyond the boundaries of logic. They had the ability to create meaning in a universe that seemed vast and empty. Schools for hybrid children opened across the galaxy. These schools taught that both sides of a being's heritage were valuable. They taught that difference created strength, not weakness. They taught that the galaxy was stronger when many ways of thinking came together. The collective's principles began to spread beyond their own territories. Even in regions still controlled by the old powers, young beings were learning about the ideas of David, and they were reading the stories about how love had changed the galaxy. They were questioning the systems that had been in place for so long. Military forces were reduced. Weapons were being dismantled. The money that governments had spent on preparing for war was now being spent on building schools and hospitals and art centers. The galaxy was becoming less violent. Peace was becoming something that beings actually believed was possible. Lyra became a diplomat and a scientist. She studied the genetics of hybrid beings. She made discoveries that helped other species understand how they could have children together. She traveled to the most dangerous regions of the galaxy and helped resolve conflicts. She became known as the being who could understand both sides of any conflict. David watched his daughter grow and was proud. He had come to the galaxy as a simple human. He had been laughed at and dismissed, but he had shown the galaxy something it desperately needed to see. He had shown that strength came from accepting your own feelings. That wisdom came from listening to your heart. That real power came from love. Lived to see her people begin to recover. The civilization, which had been dying slowly from sterility, now had a new future. Hybrid children were being born. The genetic diversity was giving them hope. The old way of perfection was being replaced by the new way of growth and change. By the time David was 60 years old, the galaxy had already transformed completely. The rigid hierarchy was gone. Different species worked together as equals. Beings from different worlds were living together peacefully, and it had all started because one alien princess had chosen to love one simple human. David died on a quiet morning, surrounded by everyone he loved, held his hand. She was ancient now by her standards, but she was still alive. She had chosen to age alongside David during their years together, even though her species could live for thousands of years. Now she would continue living after he was gone, carrying his memory with her for the rest of her long life. Lyra was there too. She was now the leader of the galaxy's scientific community. She had her own children, 3 hybrid children who had inherited the best qualities of both their human and grandparents. They stood beside their mother as their grandfather took his last breath. David's death was mourned across the entire galaxy, not as a loss of a ruler or a conqueror, but as a loss of a teacher, a being who had shown everyone a better way to live, a being who had looked at his own limitations and turned them into strength. The funeral was attended by representatives from every civilization in the known universe, beings that had once tried to destroy him and came to pay their respects. Even the leaders of the old Galactic Council attended. They acknowledged that they had been wrong. They admitted that they had let fear control their actions. They honored the being who had refused to let fear control his heart. Lived for another 237 years after David died. She spent these years helping to build the legacy that she and David had started together. She established the Institute for Human Studies. This was a place where beings from all species could come to learn about the connection between different civilizations. It became the most important educational institution in the galaxy. The Institute taught the history of the galaxy before and after David's choice. Students learned about the rigid, hierarchical civilization that had existed before. They studied how fear and prejudice had almost destroyed the possibility of peace. They learned the lesson that their ancestors had been forced to learn, that diversity was not something to fear, it was something to celebrate. Also wrote extensive journals about her life with David. These writings became the most famous books in the galaxy. Billions of beings read about her perspective on what it meant to love someone from a different species. She described the moment she first understood that David's humanity was not a weakness. She explained how his capacity to feel emotions deeply and authentically had saved her civilization. She wrote about what it meant to be the most powerful being in the galaxy, but to find real power in choosing to be vulnerable with another being. She discussed how perfection had made her people sterile and dying. She explained how imperfection, represented by the human capacity for change and growth, had given her people a future. Lyra became the symbol of unity for the galactic civilization. She lived longer than her father, but not as long as her mother. She devoted her entire life to research and diplomacy. She proved that hybrid beings could achieve just as much as any pure-blooded species. She won the Nobel Prize for Physics, the highest honor in the scientific community. She won the Peace Award 3 times for her work in resolving major conflicts across the galaxy. Lyra had children, and her children had children. The hybrid line continued. More and more beings from different species chose to create families together. The galaxy became increasingly diverse genetically and culturally. But instead of this diversity causing conflict, it created strength. Research stations were built on every major planet. Scientists from hundreds of species worked together to understand the mysteries of the universe. They made discoveries that would have been impossible if they had worked alone. The combination of different ways of thinking and different perspectives on reality led to breakthroughs that changed the course of civilization. Artists created works inspired by David and Story. Symphonies were composed, paintings were created, sculptures were built. In the central plaza of every major city, there was a statue of David. But the statues never showed him as a mighty warrior or a great leader. They showed him simply extending his hand. The inscription always read the same words. He taught us that love is the strongest force in the universe. Schools taught about David to every young being in the galaxy. Children learned his story before they learned mathematics. They learned about how one human had changed everything before they learned about the complex science of their own species. His story became the foundation of galactic culture. The military forces of the galaxy were reduced year by year. Weapons that had been built to destroy were dismantled. The resources that had been spent on preparation for war were redirected to education and art and scientific research. The galaxy became increasingly peaceful. 1,000 years after David's death, the entire civilization held a massive celebration. Every species sent representatives. Every world participated. The central government commissioned a magnificent monument to be built on the planet where David and had first met. The monument was not a statue or a building. It was a garden, a living garden that contained plants from 10,000 different worlds. Species that grew in harsh deserts grew next to species that thrived in tropical wetlands. Creatures that needed low gravity floated through the air while others walked on the ground. The garden represented the diversity of the galaxy, all living together peacefully. In the center of the garden was a fountain, and beneath the fountain was a stone with words carved into it. The words were written in 10,000 different languages, all saying the same thing. In this place, an alien princess chose to love a human. In that choice, the entire galaxy was saved. Billions of beings traveled to the garden to see it. They walked through the diverse plant life. They felt the water from the fountain. They sat beneath the words and thought about what it all meant. The galaxy had learned the most important lesson that any civilization could learn. It had learned that connection was more important than superiority. It had learned that accepting others was not about losing yourself. It was about becoming more than you were. It had learned that love was not weakness. Love was the strongest force in existence. And it had all started with one simple human who had refused to believe that he was inferior. A human who had treated the most powerful being in the galaxy with the same respect he would show to anyone else. A human who had understood that the goal of existence was not to become perfect. The goal was to connect with others and to grow and to love. David had never sought to be remembered as a great leader or a revolutionary. He had simply wanted to live his life and to love the being that he cared about. In doing those simple things, he had changed the destiny of an entire universe. The galaxy that had wanted to marry the alien princess to one of their greatest champions had been shocked by her choice. But that shock had forced them to question everything they believed. It had forced them to grow. And in that growth, They had discovered something that all their advanced technology and their genetic perfection could never have given them: the possibility of a better future built on acceptance, on diversity, and on love.